institutions up there, that's where the High Commissioner sat.
So, dear colleagues, if we don't open our standing committee meeting, time is running out, and to avoid that, we will start starting by adoption of the agenda. It has been distributed. Everybody have that one, and I would like to ask you to adopt the agenda for this standing committee meeting. Is it all right? Yes. Agenda is adopted. Then a few words in the names of the President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. So, dear colleagues, dear friends, first of all, I want to say that basically I do believe that we all share the vision that the success of the OSCE resides to the large extent on its parliamentary dimension. We as parliamentarians, and right here just now in Geneva, should constantly remind the governmental side that having a PA, it is absolutely one of the comparative advantages of the whole OSCE. But also we ourselves need to be active both as leaders of this assembly and as its voice in our own national parliaments as well. First of all, anyway, I would also like very warmly thank Azerbaijan and the head of the delegation, Mrs. Bahar Muradova, for an excellent and fruitful annual session we had in your beautiful country. So big hands and thank you. In terms of my own activities, the crisis in and around Ukraine has been at the top of my agenda since we last met in Baku. Last month I had held a series of high-level meetings, mainly in Moscow and also in Oslo. In my meetings in Moscow, I had several meetings with the high leaders of the political life in there, Foreign Minister Lavrov, the lower chamber Speaker of the Russian Parliament, Speaker Naryshkin, Speaker of the upper chamber, Mrs. Matvienko, and so in those contexts, I wanted to underline that Russia's stated commitment to diplomacy and peace in Ukraine requires a full accounting of its impact on the crisis, as well as constructive action on the ground. I emphasized further that there is no military solution to the crisis and that only a political solution can be sustainable. My Russian counterpartners referred to President Putin's new peace plan. But as I said in Moscow, any solution must be predicated on a genuine commitment by the Russian government to stop the flow of arms and military personnel across its borders with Ukraine. Russia must also respect its neighbors' sovereignty and territorial integrity, as it has committed to do as a founding member of the OSCE. As I mentioned, I met with Ukrainian Parliament Speaker Alexander Turchinov in Oslo with very wide-ranging discussions, including topics such as a status of the ceasefire, the security situation in and around Mariupol, the need to secure Ukraine's borders, plan for the Interparliamentary Liaison Group, and the OSCE-PA's mission to monitor the country's parliamentary elections this month. I assured Mr. Turchinov of the OSCE-PA's determination to help promote a diplomatic solution to the conflict, as well as our full support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity in the face of continuing threats. Part of this support also includes the commitment we are making as an assembly to ensuring a large and robust observation mission to upcoming parliamentary elections in Ukraine. These elections, needless to say, are crucially important for Ukraine's stability and democratic aspirations. On this point, I remain partly hopeful that although the first meeting of the PA's Interparliamentary Liaison Group on Ukraine had to be postponed and will not be taking place in the margin of our meeting in here, we will be able to find a time and venue to come together around a table with the PA will continue to actively facilitate that kind of meeting. We had also the first Helsinki Plus 40 seminar organized by the OSCE-PA and the Russian International Affairs Council. This was the first in the series of international seminars aimed at fomenting the reform of the OSCE, which brought together OSCE parliamentary leaders, top Russian lawmakers, OSCE experts, the academians, to evaluate the organization's past and chart lines of action to ensure its continued effectiveness. Titled Helsinki Plus 40 Prospects for Strengthening the OSCE. The seminars considered tough questions of organizational reform in light of Ukrainian crisis, which has increased the responsibility of the OSCE on the international level. Also, how to secure the OSCE's future amid new and persisting security challenges, and how the organization can best live up to its ideals as we approach of the 40th anniversary of its founding document, the Helsinki Final Act of '75. For more details in this issue, I leave to Mr. Suarez, who is chairing this project. He will brief you later on in this meeting. These are the latest activities we have had, and of course we are very eager and open to also to get your advices and analyses, guidelines for our political working. Thank you. Now I would be happy to hear any comments from the Standing Committee. Would anyone like to take the floor in this context? No? We go further. Thank you. Number 3, report of the Treasurer of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Roberto Patelli, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished members of the Standing Committee, dear colleagues, let me start by warmly thanking also from me, the Parliament of Switzerland for the support provided to our Assembly by hosting this autumn meeting, and for the outstanding and warm hospitality. Thank you very much. My gratitude also to all those member parliaments that have hosted or will host our assembly meetings. You know that we function in an extremely cost-effective way, but we need the continuous support and solidarity of national delegations to ensure that the Assembly can continue its program of activities and the meetings. So I call on those delegations that have not yet hosted a meeting to do it as soon as possible. And I have to be very clear, we need the support of our parliaments to ensure the continuity of our work. So I welcome very warmly the invitations of Finland and Mongolia for the coming meetings in 2015. Well, my report has been distributed, so I will try to be very brief. I am pleased to report to the Standing Committee that the finances of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly continue to be in a good order, and I thank also the Standing Committee for unanimously supporting the budget I have proposed for this financial year. It is also my honor to inform you that the Assembly continues to remain within the approved budget, although it seems we will come to close to 100% in our expenditures this year. Our independent external auditor in Copenhagen is currently working on the audit for the fiscal year 2013-14, and I am confident that we will once again be given a positive assessment. Mr. President, I am very pleased to report that this year we have received extra budgetary voluntary contributions from Turkey and Germany, and I warmly thank these delegations. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank once again the Danish Parliament for its important financial contribution in providing for our offices in Copenhagen and assisting with the payment for our technical equipment. And I am also very grateful to the Austrian government, which provides assistance for our liaison office in Vienna. So let me conclude by thanking also the Secretariat for the effective way they manage our finances. Thank you very much, and if there is any question, of course, we are ready to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patelli. Do you have any comments? Do you have any questions to the report of Mr. Patelli? Yes. Germany, please.
Vielen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender. Meine Frage an unseren Schatzmeister geht dahin, wie viel mehr Geld brauchen wir denn, um unsere Arbeit vernünftig ausführen zu können? Brauchen wir mehr Geld? Denn
Microphone. Yeah, it's almost turned on.
Hit the red button.
It was on.
That's what happens when you ask for more money.
Try another one.
So, jetzt. Brauchen wir mehr Geld? Denn wenn unsere Organisation, unsere Parlamentarische Versammlung mehr Geld braucht, um gut arbeiten zu können, dann liegt es an uns Parlamentariern, dafür Sorge zu tragen in unseren Heimatparlamenten, dass wir tatsächlich auch für mehr Geld sorgen. Ich weiß, dass es Mitgliedstaaten gibt, die könnten auch mehr Geld bezahlen, würden auch gerne mehr. Und ich kann deshalb unsere Freunde nur auffordern und bitten, dies auch zu tun. Denn wir wollen gute Leute in unserer Organisation, die uns helfen, Berichte zu machen, die uns helfen, unsere Arbeit zu machen. Aber heutzutage bekommt man gute Leute nicht für Billiggeld, sondern ebenfalls auch nur für gutes Geld. Danke.
Thank you, Thank you very much, Mrs. Barnett. Well, yes, as you know, we follow the scales of contributions of the executive part of the OSCE. So what for surely can be done by the delegations is to give supplementary extra contributions like your country did, like your parliament did, and also Turkey. And this is a matter that that is in the hands of us in our own parliaments. I can give the example of Slovenia, for instance. We pay per year a very relatively very low contribution, and that could be doubled, for instance. But there is something that we tried already, but we didn't succeed. So instead of 6,000 of what we pay, we could give 5,000 more per year, you know, and that would help. If everybody does it, then it will be much easier to do things. I don't know exactly what the sum would be comprehensively, but if you remember, we asked at the time for a 5 to 7% raise of the contributions, and that probably is the level that would allow us to do many more election observations, to have people there, and you know how professional our staff is. So to have people there for a longer time in order to assist better the coordinator and the leader of the delegation in the observation of elections. We could also extend our activities. Those of you who are longer members of the assembly, for instance, can remember that we used to organize visits to the missions, to the field missions. And I have that in mind as extremely useful for us to better understand what the problems the missions are tackling with in single countries, and to understand better the situation in these countries and where are the problems to be solved, and how efficient also the organization can be through its field presences. For instance, and that's it now. I don't know if Gustavo has, maybe because he is in fact helping me in doing this work, if you could say how much we would need in order to not to face difficulties at the end of the financial year.
Yes, well, I think it would be very difficult to say an exact amount, but I think, as you say, we've been asking for slight reductions on a periodic basis. I think 4 or 5% increase on the budget. We're most grateful, as you mentioned, to the parliaments of Germany and Turkey for their extra budgetary contributions. And also I have to mention, when talking about personnel, we're very grateful to the government of Italy that is seconding one of our colleagues in the Vienna liaison office, which is very helpful. It gives us a very capable professional that is working with us and working with our colleagues in Vienna. And this is also a way to assist the Assembly. Thanks.
Before I give the floor to the Secretary General, I want to say also that we are more than grateful for the extra contributions, financial contributions, but to get a more effective office, today we have very professional and very committed personnel in there. I have been admiring their commitment to our subjects, to our ideas, to our politics. But if the financing basis is very short timing, we can't make any serious investments, for example, to our personnel, and that's, of course, one of the basic structural problems in that. We do need a very capable personnel, and this is our key question also in the future, and I very much agree with Doris Barnett with her contribution in here, and I want to thank you very much about your argumentation. And now I give the floor to the Secretary General.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to comment, Ms. Barnett, thank you very much for your continued support for the staff and for increasing the resources that are available to us. There are limitations. As you know, we function on our budget by consensus less one. So many of you come here, not many, but some come here with firm instructions not to vote for any increase whatsoever in a budget. And so we have relied on other financing obligations. As you know, for 4 years, our budget was completely frozen. In keeping with the budgets of most parliaments, particularly in places where the recession was hitting hard. But we have tried to find ways to stretch our budget as far as possible. One of those ways is by relying on secondments from other parliaments or other governments. At the moment, we have Francesco Pagani, who is seconded to us by the Italian Parliament, Italian Foreign Ministry, who's been with us for nearly a year now and has another year to go. At one point, the Dutch government seconded a press officer to us for 7 years and paid for all of the expenses. As Ms. Barnett said, the German Foreign Ministry paid for our staff person to be on the ground in Ukraine for 6 weeks before the election, and enabled us to do several pre-visits by the leaders of the election observation mission, and it was very, very effective. We also, but you have to pick and choose sometimes as to what you do and what you don't do. I mean, we completely sometimes empty the office in Vienna, not to do things in Vienna, but to do things in the field, where sometimes you find only an intern in the office in Vienna because somebody's in the Balkans, somebody's in Ukraine, somebody's in Moscow, somebody's with a special representative. So we try to stretch these dollars as far as we can. But of course, it's up to the parliaments to do what they can within their own means. The idea of extra budgetary contributions has been fully utilized by the OSCE itself now for many years. Huge contributions from certain governments have funded many of the projects of the OSCE. I think something like 30% of the ODIHR's budget comes from voluntary contributions. Mr. Onen, who's asked for the floor, it has always been, like Mrs. Barnett, an advocate of increasing our resources and increasing our budget. But when we couldn't get consensus less one, Mr. Onen agreed to talk to his government, and 3 days ago, we received double the amount of their assessment. So instead of paying the 30,000 euros that they're supposed to pay, they paid 60,000 in order to enable us to do some of the things that we can't do within the present budget. And for that, we're very grateful. But we will continue to try to pick and choose the best places. But if we had more budget, we would be able to do more. We would be able to put people in the field longer for election observations. We would be able to do more pre-visits. We would be able to support all of the special representatives who do a fine job in various areas. So we would be able to do that if we had more funds. So we can certainly do a budget that's twice as big as the one we have now, and I'm sure we could justify every single person. We also need, I think, in some cases, to increase the pay of a number of the staff people at the mid and lower level because they do a great job, and sometimes They've been here for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and they're deserving of a raise. So we need to find money to be able to reward people for good service. So we very much appreciate your sentiment, Mrs. Barnett.
Thank you, Spencer. And then we will continue. I have 3 names on my list. I have Neri, I have Onen, and I have Harrell. Is it correct?
Oui, Monsieur le Président. D'abord, je voudrais féliciter Roberto et son équipe et toute l'équipe des permanents de Copenhague pour la rigueur avec laquelle ils gèrent le budget et leur efficacité. C'est une question récurrente maintenant, Monsieur le Président. Ça fait un certain nombre d'années où je suis intervenu régulièrement pour demander à ce que l'on revoie les cotisations. Lorsque la grille des cotisations a été mise en place, elle correspondait à la situation économique, démographique d'un certain nombre de pays. Mais il est bien évident qu'aujourd'hui, tout ceci a changé. Donc je crois qu'il conviendrait que l'on se mette d'accord sur un nouveau barème. Bien sûr, vous nous avez dit que ce barème ne répondait pas uniquement de notre responsabilité, puisqu'il semblerait que les États eux-mêmes, les gouvernements, aient donné leur position. N'en demeure pas moins vrai que nous pouvons donner une indication sur ce que nous souhaitons au niveau de la participation et fixer, pourquoi pas, une somme plancher de participation. Car lorsqu'on regarde la grille, je ne l'ai pas aujourd'hui en main, mais on a eu l'occasion de l'avoir en main plusieurs fois, on s'aperçoit qu'il y a des distorsions étonnantes entre des pays comme la France qui doivent verser de l'ordre de 280 000 € et certains pays qui versent moins de 3 000 €. Et pourtant, on sait qu'ils ont aujourd'hui des ressources importantes et que ce sont des pays qui ne sont plus dans la situation financière où ils étaient lorsque l'OSCE a été créé. Donc moi, je milite encore une fois et je demande à ce que l'on mette une règle et qu'on travaille sur l'instauration d'une grille qui soit claire, nette et précise. Donc je remercie évidemment les pays qui, comme vous l'avez dit, non pas bénévolement puisqu'ils ont payé, donc ce n'était pas bénévole, mais parce qu'ils ont eu la gentillesse de faire un don. Mais dans un budget, on ne peut pas équilibrer un budget uniquement avec des dons, parce que c'est trop aléatoire. Or, si on veut effectivement avoir les possibilités de travailler mieux, comme les interventions l'ont demandé, si on veut pouvoir mettre davantage de missions, si on veut pouvoir avoir du personnel très qualifié qui puisse rester plus longtemps sur le terrain, je crois qu'on ne peut pas se contenter uniquement de mesures financières aléatoires qui fait que lorsqu'on voterait le budget, on ne serait pas sûr des dépenses qu'on pourrait mettre en œuvre. Et en particulier, si on engage du personnel, il faut quand même qu'on ait l'assurance de pouvoir le payer. Donc je crois que, merci pour ceux qui font des contributions volontaires, mais je crois qu'aujourd'hui, il est important et il est même nécessaire et indispensable que l'on revoie la grille et que la grille tienne compte des possibilités des uns et des autres. Je crois qu'il faut que chaque pays contribue aux dépenses de fonctionnement de notre Assemblée en fonction de ses capacités. C'est d'ailleurs une des règles qui figure dans la Déclaration des droits de l'homme et du citoyen de la France en 1789, qui disait « chaque citoyen doit contribuer aux dépenses de l'État en fonction de ses capacités ». C'était une règle de démocratie et de républicaine. Moi, je crois que l'OSCE pourrait effectivement dire « il faut aujourd'hui revoir la grille et tenir compte des facultés contributives des uns et des autres pour fixer la contribution des différents pays membres de l'OSCE. Ça serait une mesure de justice et d'efficacité.
Thank you, Alan. And the next floor goes to Ireland. Alan Farrell, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, my questions are in relation to the budget, specifically with regard to the presentation of figures of expenditure. While Mr. Batelli has presented us with incomings, I don't see any outgoings, and I would be interested, in the interest of transparency, that this standing committee would be presented with a full account of the PA's expenditure. I have no difficulty with suggesting to the Irish government that an increase, a modest increase, be provided to the budget, and I could certainly agree with the idea of providing additional resources to the OSCE PA so that they are able to conduct more missions and continue the good work that they do, but only on the basis of a presentation of additional financial information so that we can make an informed decision with regard to the scale of contribution that my country makes, which is a rather modest 20-odd thousand. But as I said, it would be my preference, in the interest of openness and transparency, that the budget would actually be presented to the committee, to the standing committee, in a much more fulsome manner, as opposed to a very brief document which Mr. Botelli has prepared. And as I said, I have no difficulty with what you have prepared, but unfortunately it does not provide me with information on what monies we're expending within the organisation. So perhaps you would be so kind as to inform me whether that information is available, and a question as to why it is not presented routinely to the standing committee for adoption. And if it is the case that it is not a standard practice, then I would request that the standing committee would adopt a resolution in order to do that for future budgets. Thank you.
Thank you. And then, Emin, sorry, you have the next floor, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be very short, and maybe for 2 years, more than 2 years, we are talking about this issue, the budget issue, the problem. And I think we don't carry out this budget problem with the voluntary contributions. So we need a stable solution. And I think my advice, this calculation method should be recalculated, because maybe 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, this established the rules. I mean, from 20 years ago or 25 years ago, the countries are changed. The level of their richness and wellness is changed. So maybe 20 years ago, a poor country, now it is a rich country. So I think Mr. Botelli and his staff will be recalculate how to get the money more, if it is according to GDP, if it is according to population of the countries. I mean, I think it's not true that we shouldn't raise 5 or 7%. It's not true, I think. We should recalculate according to GDP, population, and other technical parameters. And I think there's a chance to make this calculation to present the government meeting in Basel nearly 2 months later, because we just told we are not the person that we decide to give more money. We also bring our governments or parliaments. So I think if it is possible to reach that calculation system to the ministerial meetings, maybe it would be a very short and correct decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Emin. And then the next speaker comes from Azerbaijan, Mr. Guriev.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just actually wanted to repeat whatever has been said by my colleague from Turkey, Mr. Unen. I really believe that we have to have some concrete mechanism of getting either contribution or the membership fee, and we have really to establish very concrete mechanism of that. Otherwise, we have been discussing for many times how we can get the extra contribution. I believe that there are the number of countries who are enabled or who are in position to pay much more than they pay now. This is why my advice is also to think about that and to figure out or to elaborate some concrete and this very solid or valid mechanism for that. And also maybe another version, another mechanism could be the needs of OSCE. For example, needs for each year or for coming years, depending on the events, depending on the agenda. It is another type of, let's say, mechanism of getting some contribution. But it should be very, very clear for each country. This is why I think we have to work on that, and for the next standing committee or the bureau meeting, we have to be ready for any clarification that is raised here by our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then the last speaker on the list is from Georgia. So, Charatelli, the floor is yours. And then I asked our treasurer to conclude the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also believe that finally we will solve this problem. I don't want to repeat what was also presented here, and I know that Mr. Patel is always precisely describing all our expenditures and needs and so on and so forth, but the problem is remaining all the time. And we're repeatedly talking about recalculations, different scales, and I don't think that it's such a complicated thing to solve and a problem to solve. There were many interesting suggestions, and I think that it's quite simple to figure out what to do. How to implement that, it's maybe a little bit difficult. I don't know, we experienced an inconvenience before countries because they are paying, they are financing their delegations, they are paying all expenses when it comes to national delegations. But reality is that we have still very low minimum, and many countries can pay more. My colleagues also admitted that, and that is really what we have at this moment. So let's set up the deadline when we will do that. Maybe it will be next bureau, or what's our bylaws, according to our bylaws, how we're talking that, and more explicitly, just, I don't know, we will vote for that, or there's another mechanism to solve this problem. But let's say that, and it will be like a rule, that mandatory minimum contribution will be doubled, for instance. Instead of 1,500, we'll have 3,000 as a mandatory minimum. Then above that, there are more rich countries, there are countries with less resources they can add. I don't know, I can't, of course I can suggest something more concrete, but there are a lot of suggestions, and we have to finally solve this problem and not to talk the similar things all the time, that it's a very low mandatory contribution, mandatory fees, and there are rich countries who are even not paying that. That's my position. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And before I give the floor to our treasurer, I ask you to accept the idea that we will prepare some kind of action plan for our next bureau meeting in a few months, so that maybe it would be worth to make some kind of preparations in that, but we do need the comments from the Roberto's side, please.
Thank you, President. Yes, you anticipated me in announcing that we should dedicate a session of the bureau that would be able then to propose to the standing committee a solution or something. I would like to remind you that we had a frozen budget for 4 years in a row, among other things. About the question and suggestions that were put by our Irish colleague, it is in accordance with the rules that we have that it is the winter meeting the place where what are you demanding is going on and presented in a very detailed way. Because We just finished our financial year 3 days ago, and this is meant to be a very, very general information and maybe the starting point for a debate that is now happening. Besides that, at any moment, you can ask me or the Secretary General any kind of clarification that you want to have about the budget in any moment, and you will get all the answers needed. And I can assure you that not only under my mandate, but also before, the transparency of the financial managing of the Assembly was total and will remain that way, I hope. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto, and let's make a conclusion so that we will come back to the issue in our next Bureau meeting, preparing some kind of action plan for our long-term financing plan. Thank you very much, and we will conclude the number 3. Then we go further to number 4, report by the Secretary General, very well-known guy from our family. So, Spencer Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, of course, I want to warmly thank our host, the Parliament of Switzerland, for their wonderful hospitality, really beyond expectations. And I was reminded today at lunch that a few years ago I met with a man who's the chief chef at something called the French Laundry, one of the most famous restaurants in the world in the Napa Valley for fine dining. And I asked him, what is the definition of fine dining? And he said, well, good food, presentation, white tablecloths, and cutlery. So today, for 2 days in a row, the Swiss Parliament has given us fine dining for the first time in the history of the Parliamentary Assembly, and for that we are very grateful. I'm sure that will be a high standard which will probably never be matched again. So I thank you very much for the excellent hospitality and the excellent gourmet food. We also owe thanks to the Geneva Center for Democratic Control of the Armed Forces, because this meeting and the main substance of it was done jointly with them. Most of the speakers and the program were organized by them, and Teddy Winkler and his team did a great job, along with Barbara Herring and the Swiss Parliament. So we're very grateful for that. Just to add to what Mr. Batelli said, I mean, we completed our budget year 3 days ago, and what happens? I would ask Alan just to clarify what we do. The normal fiscal year is October 1st to September 30th. And the way it works is on September the 30th, we close the books. The auditor comes to the headquarters. This is an outside, independent, state-authorized chartered accountant, not someone who works for us, an outside person. Closes the books, and now over these next few weeks, she will be going through and doing a complete audit of all of our expenditures. Before the Bureau meeting in Basel, we will have an auditor's report which will be distributed to the Bureau and discussed. It will also be presented at the winter meeting, which is normal for us to present the audit report and what it said and answer any questions anyone might have. We also, the budget itself is prepared in the following way. The Treasurer and I and the Secretariat prepare a draft budget which is considered by the Bureau at our spring meeting, usually in April, in Copenhagen. And then it is sent out 30 days before, I think at least 30 days is the requirement, that the proposed budget is sent out to all of the participating states, because the budget is voted on at the Standing Committee at the annual session. And at that annual session in Baku, not only do you have the budget, but you also have the report on all the expenditures for the previous year, which was presented to you in Baku. So I think it's been a system which has served us very well. I think it's more transparent than any other system in the OSCE. We're certainly the only ones that have outside independent audits, and sometimes the people in Vienna are not very happy when we point that out because they don't do it that way. But I think we've done a good job. I think we're going to have another clean audit this year. We'll be within the budget. As I was looking at the figures after the books closed the other day, I found that we were actually 6,000 euros under the approved budget, but we were 3,000 euro over the amount of money that had come in because one country that owed 6,000 euro didn't pay their dues. So we were both over and under, but I think it was a great accomplishment. Gustavo Pieras and Kurt Laraste do a great job of keeping track of everything. We have more receipts and more vouchers than I ever believed possible in an organization this small, and we also employ an outside accounting specialist who also comes in once a week to make sure that all of the expenditures are being reconciled. So I'm very proud of that, and I think we're probably one of the only international organizations that you'll ever encounter that has had such a clean record and such a good record of staying within its expenditures. The annual session in Baku was a great success. Our Azeri friends did a great job of hosting that meeting, and of course Baku is a wonderful place, and for those of you who had never been there before or who hadn't been there in 10 or 15 years, it was really quite a surprise to see how well it had developed. So we also have coming up a full election observation program. This morning, the director of the ODIHR, Michael Link, was here. I think he may still be here, but he was here this morning, and we arranged a meeting with the parliamentarians who will lead the election observations in Ukraine and in Bosnia, and I gave a report on the preparations for the American elections. We have 4 elections coming up in very short order during these 2 months. Bosnia-Herzegovina, then Ukraine, then the United States, and then Moldova on the 30th of November. I'm always amazed and pleased at how many parliamentarians are willing to come forward and participate in these election observation missions. But it's hard work, it's important work, and there's nobody better qualified to do it than elected politicians who understand elections and what they're all about and what matters and what doesn't in terms of assessing whether or not it was free and fair. Our research fellowship program, which many of you know about, has been an outstanding success now for 20 years. We have had several hundred young men and women who are graduate students, master's degrees, doctorates, who have come to us for 6 months or a year to provide us not only with the best research capacity anywhere in the OSCE, but also to make sure that we have the 6th language capability within our secretariat. We now have interns or research assistants from France, the Czech Republic, Italy, England, and Russia in our office in Copenhagen, and we have research fellows from the United States, Romania, and Germany in our offices in Vienna. So this has been a great program, and many of our actual permanent staff, who a long time ago were actually research assistants before they went on to another life and then came back to us. So our first actual research assistant in 1995 was Gustavo Pieras from Spain, who after leaving us for a year went back to get his master's degree and then worked in the Spanish Parliament for 5 years before coming back to the International Secretariat, where he has risen to be Deputy Secretary General and an indispensable partner in managing this Secretariat. Dana Biergar, my assistant, and Nat Perry supervise the research assistant program, and they do an excellent job. We have hundreds of applications from very bright young people throughout the OSCE area. Our Vienna liaison office, Ambassador Notella, who you all know well, represents us extremely well in the Permanent Council. He is now almost the dean of the diplomatic corps in terms of the participants in the Permanent Council, because he's been there for more than a decade now, and most of the ambassadors rotate in or out every 2 or 3 or 4 years. So he's seen them sometimes 3 or 4 years over. He's very influential, very well respected, understands the process as well as anybody in the OSCE, and each week we send to you a one-page report. We do things in 1 pages because we know how busy you are and you're not going to read more than 1 page, even if you bother to read that. But each week, usually on a Monday, you'll get from us a report that's to the President and me, which goes to each delegation, about what took place in the Permanent Council and in Vienna, with an analytical insight about what it means and what happened behind the scenes. So if you really want to know how the governmental side is working in Vienna, take a look at those reports every now and then. We also provide information through our News from Copenhagen once a week. It's also just 1 page. And it's 1 page so that we can let you know what your colleagues are doing and what we're doing. And every time there's an article about a delegation going somewhere or one of our leaders going somewhere, it also indicates which one of the staff was responsible for organizing or assisting in that particular endeavor. I think that this staff that supports this assembly is, I think, the best that I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of them in the 30, 40 years I've been involved in this business. They are serious, resourceful, experienced, and they serve you very well, and they all wear about 5 hats. I mean, you can take Andreas Baker's the director of elections, so you can imagine how busy that keeps him. He's also the director of the 3rd committee, which is in the human dimension thing, so you can imagine how busy he is. He also assists in speech writing, and because he's done a lot of that over the years, and is involved with dealing with the Scandinavian countries, since he's half Danish and half Canadian, and he deals with the Arctic Circle matters. So all of them do many things. They do them skillfully and well, and I'm very proud of them and the work that they do. So we have several meetings upcoming, Mr. Chairman. I know we'll get to upcoming meetings later on, but the Bureau meeting will take place on December 3rd in Basel on the eve of the Ministerial Council. The opening session of the Ministerial Council will be on December 4th and will be addressed by our President, Mr. Genève. The next winter meeting will take place in Vienna on February the 19th and 20th, where we hear from all the governmental officials about how the different elements and components of the governmental side are working and what they're doing. Our Bureau meeting will take place probably toward the end of April in 2015, or maybe this year at the beginning of May, but we have to coordinate with our Danish host about when the facilities will be available. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my report, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
Thank you, our Secretary General. Very comprehensive report. And now we have, yes, the first floor goes to United Kingdom, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I hope this is the place to raise it. The Secretary General referred to future meetings and read down the list of those meetings from paragraph 7, but didn't go right to the end. And I want to say that I understand, of course, what our Treasurer said about the desirability of member states, member parliaments offering invitations. And I know that we are all deeply grateful to Mongolia for making the offer of this autumn meeting for 2015. But I do think, since it's only 12 months away and we don't meet that often, that it would be very interesting to know how it is proposed to make a autumn meeting of the length which it normally is, practicable, affordable, and attendable for a majority of people from the participating states. I well understand that we can't have all meetings in capitals next door to where we live. There's always going to be travelling involved for somebody. But I hope that our friends and colleagues from Mongolia will understand when I say it's not that easy to get there, anyway, as a layman, when you look into it. And I think, as I say, costs and time and practicalities, if it is going to be well attended and not take double the time that these meetings normally take, it would be quite nice for the Standing Committee and the leaders of delegations to have some idea of what's proposed.
Thank you, Peter. And then Spencer, please.
Thank you, Lord Bonus. You're absolutely right. It's a long way away. Astana has been a long way away. Almaty was a long way away twice. And sometimes it's very difficult to get to various places because of plane connections and time. The Mongolian, we will be meeting with the Mongolian delegation today to go over some of those details and try to see what we can do about ameliorating some of the problems that relate to travel. We've had some experience with that, and hopefully we will be able to do it. But I want to tell you that President Migliore, when he was president, was one of the early OSCE visitors to Mongolia, and several of the I don't know whether the chairman of the office has been there. I know the Secretary General has been there, and some of the other OSCE officials. So they are a welcome partner, and the fact that they're a long way away doesn't mean that they're second-class citizens. So we're going to do our very best to make it as convenient and as practical and as logistically safe for everyone. So thank you for raising that. It will be difficult.
Mr. President, may I just add to that? I don't want an unfortunate spin to be put upon what I said. Of course, Mongolia are welcome partners. Of course, influential and important people whose job it is have actually gone to visit. The point that I was making is that you are talking about parliamentarians travelling for an autumn meeting. Were I asking the question, I would not be asking the question about the annual meeting. I well understand that everybody's to be welcome and inclusive. It was purely the timescale for this meeting and the practicalities which I think need to be addressed, and I'm glad to hear that they are going to be addressed, and hopefully the Standing Committee can be told of the outcome.
Thank you, Lord Bowness. And then Mariani from France, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voulais défendre l'idée de cette réunion en Mongolie. En tant que représentant spécial de notre Assemblée pour l'Asie centrale, la Mongolie, je me suis rendu l'année dernière dans ce pays. Sincèrement, je crois que si on veut, au-delà des mots, encourager certains pays et saluer certains efforts, les efforts qui ont été faits par la Mongolie pour faire un véritable régime parlementaire sont indéniables. Les résultats de surcroît sont remarquables. Et finalement, quand on compare le coût, sincèrement, on a fait dans le passé, je me souviens, des sessions, et je m'en félicite, aux États-Unis ou au Canada. Pour quelqu'un qui est en Europe, ça coûte guère plus cher les frais de déplacement. Alors c'est vrai que c'est un peu plus fatigant peut-être parce qu'il n'y a pas de vol direct, mais quand on passe dans notre Assemblée son temps à dire qu'on veut défendre la démocratie, je pense que par moment on peut accepter de faire une escale dans un pays qui aujourd'hui, enfin une escale pour changer d'avion, pour défendre le travail qui a été fait dans ce pays qui aujourd'hui peut être véritablement montré en exemple dans cette région. Donc personnellement, je soutiens absolument le principe de cette réunion en Mongolie.
Okay, and then Spain, Isabella Pochuelo.
Gracias, presidente. Mis palabras no se refieren a la próxima reunión en Mongolia, sino a la observación electoral a la que el secretario general ha hecho referencia como uno de los principales trabajos que realiza la Asamblea Parlamentaria, cuestión en la que todos coincidimos y a la que dedicamos una gran parte de los diputados y diputadas que pertenecemos a esta Asamblea. Hemos dedicado grandes esfuerzos a lo largo de estos años. Yo quería sugerir al presidente y al secretario general la posibilidad de que se gestionara ante el Gobierno de Túnez la invitación para poder asistir a las elecciones que se celebrarán el próximo 23 de noviembre de este año. Creo que sería muy importante, ya que en las elecciones constituyentes, cuando se constituyó el Parlamento tunecino para elaborar la Constitución que actualmente está aprobada, se invitó a la Asamblea Parlamentaria de la OSCE a asistir como observadores electorales y realizamos en una amplia misión un trabajo excelente. Lo capitaneó nuestro anterior presidente Migliori, muy cercano como italiano a Túnez, y yo creo que fue un gran éxito, no solamente por lo que significó de validar la limpieza y la buena organización y los estándares democráticos de esas elecciones constituyentes, sino porque era la primera vez que uno de los estados de la primavera árabe daba ese paso hacia adelante, y su posterior evolución ha sido una evolución muy positiva, ejemplar, y que creo que todos aquí reconocemos. En la reunión que tuvimos ayer en el Foro Mediterráneo se puso así de manifiesto también, aunque lamentablemente ellos no pudieron estar, los representantes de la Asamblea tunecina, pero escuchamos a los representantes de los otros países del Mediterráneo que reclamaban una mayor actividad, una mayor presencia de la Asamblea Parlamentaria, una mirada más directa de la Asamblea Parlamentaria y de la OSCE hacia el Mediterráneo. Concluimos, después de muchas intervenciones, como ustedes saben, en que realmente el Mediterráneo ahora mismo es un foco de tensiones, de crisis, de riesgos hacia la seguridad, no solamente del propio Mediterráneo, sino del conjunto de Europa y de la comunidad internacional. Y me parece que si la Asamblea Parlamentaria, como bien decía el presidente anteriormente en su primera exposición, tiene que tener una gran presencia política, qué mejor que tomar la iniciativa en este sentido y que la Asamblea Parlamentaria dirigiera parte de su mirada y parte de sus trabajos también hacia el Mediterráneo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Isabel. And then Luigi Campani from Italy.
Grazie Presidente. Molto brevemente per aggiungere anche la nostra voce a quella molto ben sentita adesso della collega spagnola, perché sarebbe un peccato, appunto la collega ricordava il nostro viaggio 2 anni fa per la prima Assemblea Costituente in Tunisia, sarebbe una lacuna della nostra presenza, della nostra attenzione al Mediterraneo non partecipare a questo monitoraggio, e per cui non so che cosa possa fare la Presidenza, ma attraverso tutti i canali possibili segnalare questa esigenza negli stessi termini cui si rifaceva la collega spagnola. Grazie.
Okay, anybody else want to comment? Not necessarily. So, do you want to conclude?
Well, I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, that when you think that there are 56 states in the OSCE that have parliaments, and the number of presidential and parliamentary elections each year is quite numerous, and we simply can't do them all. There are some elections that we don't do because they conflict with our meetings in the winter or in the fall or in the summer, and some of which don't really need observation. We were the only ones who observed the first Tunisian elections, and many of us were there. It was a very important event. But since that time, we have not observed any elections outside of the OSCE principal states. We get invitations and requests all the time, everywhere from Thailand to Afghanistan to Israel and so on. And we just simply don't have the staff or the resources to start down that road.
So we can close this point. Thank you. And go further to the next one. Number 5, reports and information of activities of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and 5.1 election observation missions. We have very busy calendar this autumn, and in August, we know the OSCE PA observed the first direct presidential elections in Turkey. And this is why I invite Mrs. Vilja Halegnaite, who acted as a special coordinator of the mission, to inform the Standing Committee of its outcomes. So, Vilja, where are you?
Yes, I am here, Mr. President. Thank you. Dear colleagues,
please.
I was very honored to be appointed as OSCE Special Coordinator for the election observers in Turkey. And first of all, I want to thank the President, Ilka Kanerva, Chair in Office, Mr. Didier Burkhalter, Åsa Lindestam, who served as leader of the OSCE PA delegation, and of course our dear staff members, Roberto, Andrea, Serena, and Firuze from Turkey. It was my first time when I fulfilled such a responsible duty. And I should say that it is not a very easy job. I would suggest each of us to try once to do it, because it gives really a very interesting experience. On the day after the election, I was very pleased to announce that this first direct presidential election showed us that there is a vibrant political life in Turkey. The results showed the potential for a healthy balance in political forces. At the same time, we had to know that certain challenges, particularly the imbalanced media coverage, have to be overcome and to fully live up to the democratic aspirations of the Turkish people. It was a really historic day, August the 10th, because for the first time Turkish people were personally able to select their president. 3 clearly distinct visions for the future of Turkey were presented to the voters to choose between. As was noted already, it was clear that one candidate, the Prime Minister, was dominant in the media coverage, and it was almost certainly to his benefit when voters entered polling booths to cast their votes for one of the 3 faces on the ballots. The effective work of political parties in Turkey was a good sign for the country's future and for the sake of democracy. I hope, and I have expressed this hope during the meeting with journalists in Turkey, that the role of Parliament remains undiminished. During our mission, I was pleased to meet on several occasions with our parliamentary colleagues from Turkey, and I thank Mr. Onen in particular for his support and engagement with our mission. We worked closely with long-term observers from ODIHR. I would describe this work together as business as usual. And the political perspective brought by the parliamentary teams, together with the detailed information gathered by ODIHR's long-term observers, produced a result that I believe we can all be pleased with. I am very grateful to the director of ODIHR. He personally was involved in our debate. And of course, to his team, which generally understood the OSCE EPA's will to convey a solid and informative message. Nevertheless, by the time we arrived in the country, ODIHR's team had already prepared their conclusions. The whole process would be smoother if our two institutions could start working together earlier. Our teams should cooperate on the draft statement from the moment they are in the country. Thereby ensuring that when the political leadership arrives, most problems will have been already settled. The OSCE EPA's Secretariat is well qualified and prepared to handle this process, even before the arrival of parliamentarians. And the ODIHR should be encouraged to work with our staff together. We also worked well with colleagues from the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly. However, at the last moment, they tried to change a long-standing practice through which an OSCE EPA representative moderates the press conference. I have in mind, not myself, Director of Elections fulfilled this duty. But I had to work to ensure that this attempt to push our director away was unsuccessful. And I would very appreciate your support, dear colleagues, in the future to make sure that this long-established practice is maintained. The OSCE has built up a well-earned reputation as leader in the field of election observation. And of course, it is important that we maintain our role and our strength. But in general, I think that our work went through smoothly, and we were very impressed by capability of Turkish institutions, Turkish colleagues, Turkish parties to lead the elections at the election day. It was really good done, colleagues, and I congratulate you with it. Thank you, Mr. President. I have finished.
Thank you, Vilja. Thank you, Vilja, very much indeed to you and for your team. Thanks a lot. And do you have any questions or comments to her report? If not, oh yeah, Mr. Onen, Emil.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to thank to Asa and Vilja, and as well as the Secretariat, to Roberto and Andreas, for their valuable work in the limited election observation mission of the 2014 presidential elections of Turkey. It was the first ever direct election of the President of Turkey, and we believe it is a milestone of Turkey's history of democracy. And finally, I would like to assure that your constructive criticism will guide us in the years to come towards a perfect electoral procedure. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And then somebody else. If not, I want to continue very briefly by saying that the next mission will take in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Actually, it's in next week, and our operation there will be headed by our treasurer, Mr. Patelli, and by the second committee reporter, Marietta Tidei. So that's the next stop, and then there will be Ukraine, 26th of October, parliamentary elections in Ukraine, in a hotspot in a way, and that operation will be headed by Kent Härstedt from Sweden, and Doris Barnett from Germany. And you will have very exciting moments in front of you. All the best. And then I also very pleased that Isabel Santos will lead our team to United States of America in early November. And they will take care of the business in there with some other delegations from different OSCE countries. And that's very good indeed also. You have received the information distribution has been taking place, and you know that some other questions concerning these elections can be asked later on also of me or from our secretariat, so that I encourage to contact us whatever is in your mind. But do you have any short comments or questions on this? If not, no, thank you. We go further. 5.2, our ad hoc committees, and then I call Mr. Suarez, our most prominent delegate in this.
Dear President,
session.
don't talk too much.
No, I'm talking about you.
Vice President. I know.
So,
that's why I said.
But our friend, please, you have your report concerning your essential tasks. Please.
We had a very good meeting in Moscow. It's an initiative that was taken by our Secretary General, Spencer Oliver. I think it was a very good idea to celebrate the 40 years of Helsinki and the spirit of Helsinki with 4 debates that will take place. One of them took place in Moscow with the help of our friends from the Russian International Affairs Council, led by Igor Ivanov, that was a former foreign minister of Russian Federation, and that was for a long time an experienced diplomat of the former Soviet Union. It was a very good meeting in Moscow. It will be followed by a meeting in Washington, hosted by the Marshall Fund. I think it's in November. After, we'll have a meeting in Stockholm, and we'll finish in your own country, Mr. President, in Helsinki in August 2015. That will mean exactly 40 years from Helsinki Final Act. The idea, as I said, is absolutely excellent. The work done by Maria Shepurina, who is leading the team from the Secretariat, is also an excellent work. And I think it was very important to understand with our friends from the Russian Federation that hosted us, with some of our former presidents. Goran Lenmarker was there, and Javier Gurperez was also there, and they participated actively in the discussions. And for me personally, I say very humbly, it was very, very important to understand the mood of our friends of the Russian Federation, and to understand the climate we are living here in this region of the world 40 years after Helsinki Final Act, and why, in a certain way, a certain smell of Cold War is reappearing. I will repeat what I said in my statement here during the Ukrainian discussion. It has to be a work done by both sides. And we need, and I recognize myself in what has been said by Doris Barnett, and we need somebody or some of us to stay here for peace, for building of peace and dialogue in the good sense of the Helsinki spirit. Of course, everybody has to stay with the compromises that were assumed 40 years ago in Helsinki Final Acts, and the principles of Helsinki Final Act that gave the way for the democracies that we know in the former Soviet Union countries. And we have to be very aware of the dangers, but the speech of peace, the
the building of the peace depends on these initiatives, and I think it's very important to greet the idea that Spencer had a few months ago, and that both presidents, you, Ika Canerva, and your antecessor, Ranko Krivokaptic, agreed with enthusiasm. And I'm very honored to be the chair of this mission. And we will proceed in Washington. Thank you so much. Once again, thank you to our colleagues from the Russian Federation that hosted us so warmly and were so frank. We had a discussion in the meeting room during one day. You were there, Mr. President. And we had the next day, and you were not there because you couldn't be there, we had a very interesting discussion in the State Institute for Foreign Relations of Moscow. And it was very, very interesting. I remember very well what Spencer said, what I myself humbly said, to punch the discussion. And I think it was very, very interesting for those who were there. And I hope that in the end of this work, thanks to Maria Shepurina and the marvelous work she's doing, we'll have a book, at least a book, and probably a DVD with all the discussions and with all the proposals that were made during this initiative. Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are really in good hands when we are proceeding further with these ideas. So now I welcome any comments, any questions. If not, we go further. Thank you very much indeed. And then 5.3, we have the border issues. Sanchez Amor to inform us about his activities, and we know that time is very, very short, and this is why I asked the very short report as well. Thank you.
Gracias, presidente. En primer lugar, agradecer la confianza que ha vuelto a depositar en mí para llevar esta representación especial adelante. Agradezco la posibilidad de hablar a los colegas porque en la reunión de Bakú no hubo tiempo suficiente para hacer este informe. En los conflictos de frontera hay aspectos que tienen que ver con las cuestiones militares y que parece lógico y natural que caigan de la parte gubernamental de nuestra organización, pero hay muchos aspectos políticos que creo que deben ser parte de nuestra agenda habitual. Al final del ciclo de conflicto, en un momento de asentamiento de los conflictos, todas las medidas de creación de confianza, las medidas de prevención de nuevos conflictos, tienen aspectos muy políticos en los que creo que la Asamblea Parlamentaria tiene un papel para jugar. Todo lo que tiene que ver con la seguridad soft, todo lo que tiene que ver con esas medidas directamente políticas, creo que son parte natural de nuestra agenda. La idea de la representación especial, como he tenido ocasión de hablar con el presidente Canerva esta mañana, sería estudiar el conflicto de frontera desde el punto de vista de la vida diaria de los ciudadanos que lo sufren, en la convicción de que una atención política preferente a esa escala cercana de un conflicto de frontera ayuda a la resolución del problema en un alto nivel político. Yo creo que el caso de Georgia es un caso evidente. ¿Cuáles son el programa de trabajo desarrollado y por desarrollar? Bueno, los aspectos fronterizos de los conflictos enquistados que todos conocemos. He visitado Georgia en 2 ocasiones en los últimos meses por invitación de la Asociación para el Desarrollo de la Población de Georgia. Fue una sugerencia de nuestro colega Sereteli incluirme como orador en esa reunión sobre territorios ocupados, y otra intervención de la mano de Plataforma, que es una plataforma de autoridades locales y regionales de Europa para cooperación con el Este, que me invitaron también a Georgia. En ambas ocasiones he utilizado mi visita a Georgia para volver a la línea administrativa con Osetia y para hablar con actores políticos tanto de la Unión Europea como del propio país. He visitado la zona de Gibraltar en 2 ocasiones. Gibraltar, con independencia del problema político de fondo, estaba sufriendo ahora dificultades en el tráfico de trabajadores fronterizos y también he tenido ocasión de conocerlo de primera mano. He participado en un interesante congreso en Madrid sobre el papel del diálogo interreligioso en la prevención y en el asentamiento de los conflictos. de la mano del Instituto de Diplomacia Cultural que está radicado en Berlín, y también de la mano de esta institución tuve ocasión de participar en Corea del Sur en un congreso en el que también pude hablar de ese papel del diálogo interreligioso en el asentamiento de los conflictos, especialmente en fronteras en los que, además de la frontera política, hay una frontera religiosa. La agenda, el programa para los próximos meses incluye, obviamente, la situación en Ucrania. En Ucrania vamos a conocer, además de los problemas que tienen mucho que ver con lo militar de la frontera ruso-ucrania, vamos a vivir otro proceso de reborderización, de refronterización entre Crimea y el resto de Ucrania. Creo que es un proceso que debemos seguir desde ese punto de vista. En Georgia creo que el hecho de que haya, además de las reuniones de Ginebra, un elemento de contacto para los problemas diarios que se llama el mecanismo de contacto entre las autoridades de ambas partes, en los que hay una línea de teléfono abierta para los pequeños conflictos que suceden día a día, es la prueba de que la atención en esta escala del problema ayuda a resolver los conflictos. Tengo pendiente una visita a Azerbaiyán. He hablado con los colegas de la delegación de Azerbaiyán en esta reunión de Ginebra para la posibilidad de conocer sobre el terreno la situación en su línea de contacto, y está el problema de Transnistria. En muchos de estos casos nos encontramos con una dificultad política evidente. Estamos tratando con problemas de frontera en unas líneas que no podemos reconocer políticamente como fronteras, pero los problemas son similares a los de una frontera, con la dificultad de que no lo son desde el punto de vista jurídico, y eso obliga a un encaje político y jurídico especialmente complicado. Me gustaría, si el tiempo lo permite, en el futuro visitar Chipre y conocer la situación de Chipre, y un asunto que había hablado con mis colegas turcos en el pasado era la posibilidad de ayudar a crear el clima para la reapertura de la frontera turco-armenia. Desde el punto de vista de nuestra organización, querido presidente, creo que la Academia de Border Management que tenemos en Tayikistán debe incluir en sus programas este otro aspecto, que no es meramente de seguridad, sino que es de cooperación en la formación de los agentes de Border Management de nuestra organización. Esos agentes de seguridad tienen que tener también una visión de esta última fase del conflicto, que tiene que ver con la cooperación, y creo que tenemos que extender nuestras relaciones a algunas entidades de ámbito europeo que tienen una enorme memoria del trabajo de cooperación transfronteriza en Europa, como es la Asociación Europea de Regiones Fronterizas, con la que debemos ver la posibilidad de tener algún acuerdo. Nada más, muchas gracias por la atención. Lamento haber utilizado más tiempo, pero es el que no pude utilizar en Bakú. Gracias a todos.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate. Any comments? If not, we go. Okay, from Azerbaijan, yeah, Mr. Aliyev.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may, on behalf of Chris Smith,
Yeah,
who is
not yet. Just one question concerning Mr. Santos' report.
Okay.
Yes, please. Aliyev.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate the idea of our rapporteur to visit the border of Azerbaijan, between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and we have very short discussions over the issue. And I think these questions should not be stay out of the attention of PA. So the only thing is that I hope our rapporteur, Mr. Ignacio Sanchez, is going to be to face is that we have about 890 kilometers of border with Armenia. But unfortunately, some of them are not border. They are the contact lines. But of course, there are the area where we really call borders. But it will be very difficult for our rapporteur to tackle this issue. But nevertheless, I think that Azerbaijan side is ready to create any conditions for this initiative. And I think Mr. Sanchez has a great experience in dealing with that issue, and he will succeed to prepare some the information from the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And okay, Armenia, Yes, in the name of balance. Thank you.
Уважаемый господин председатель, армянская сторона тоже готова принять нашего испанского коллегу, потому что лишь внимательный мониторинг границы и со стороны Азербайджана, и со стороны Нагорно-Карабахской республики позволит создать более-менее объективное представление о том, что происходит на нашей общей границе. Вместе с тем, я хотел бы попросить коллегу из Азербайджана, что в случае посещения представителя ОБСЕ Нагорно-Карабахской республики, чтобы он не стал бы персоной нон-грата для Азербайджана, как это бывает со всеми, кто посещает зону нашего конфликта. Спасибо.
Okay, but very, very briefly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm just obliged to make a few clarifications. We have never declared the person visiting Nagorno-Karabakh and the other occupied areas with the permission of Azerbaijani government. Never. We declared those people who visited illegally without any notification, without any permission, according to the constitution and the law of Azerbaijan, as well as to the international principles to this area. This is why, Mr. Gagamian, please don't mix up these two issues. We will welcome very much our rapporteur to come to the border between Azerbaijan and Armenia, as well as go to the occupied area, which we call not border, but the contact line, which is very obvious and clear. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And now, really, thank you, gentlemen. And now we go further. I would like to invite Mr. Mike McIntyre to report about human trafficking. Now it's your time, please.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of my colleague, Congressman Chris Smith, who is the Assembly's Special Representative on Human Trafficking, I would like to make everyone here aware of the drastic cuts to the OSCE's resources to combat trafficking in human beings. We are concerned that this is a shocking step backward. And while Congressman Smith is unable to join us this weekend, the U.S. delegation is circulating a letter from him that all of you should have received, and we're happy to pass it out to you if you do not have it in front of you. But in this letter, he outlines with more detail the help that we need and asking you to urge your government to support the restoration of funding in 2015 for this very, very important mission of the OSCE. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And then to the human trafficking, Armenia, please.
Мы всецело поддерживаем предложение американской делегации и считаем, что очень актуально обратить внимание на эти вопросы, тем более на фоне тех событий, которые происходят в Сирии, происходят в Ираке. Так что армянская делегация всецело поддерживает предложение американских коллег и надеемся, что обязательно этот вопрос найдет положительное решение. Спасибо.
Thank you. And in the names of our meeting, our best greetings to Mr. Smith. Thank you. And then we move further. It's time to ask Mary Fry to give her report on the gender issue. I saw you somewhere. Yeah, over there. Please, Mary.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I want to apologize for not having been at the Baku conference in the summer to give my report and the gender lunch, etc. But a kidney stone is a very painful thing. So that's all I have to say. I just wanted to thank some people, though, because I know that Wahlberg or Habsburg Douglas presented my report, and from what I heard, she did an excellent job, and that Senator Malte, who is a Canadian colleague, presented my gender-related amendments, and that the U.S. delegation assisted in doing the same thing. Now, This is the 10th year of the action plan. We're celebrating the anniversary of the OSCE gender plan. This is 10 years this year. And gender equality review conferences have been occurring, one in Vienna in July, and there were very many prominent members of our Parliamentary Assembly who presented there, Margareta Cederfelt from Sweden, Gordana Komish from Serbia, and Arta Dade from Albania. So we have a lot of our own PA people taking a major role in looking at this issue of the gender plan 10 years later. The human dimension implementation meeting was in September in Warsaw, and I think what we see is that the Secretary General of the OSCE also gave his evaluation report of the 10 years in July. Now, I think what is a little disappointing to say about that evaluation of 10 years of an action plan is that there has been some progress. And this, we've seen that now men are still overrepresented in the first dimension, and that men are underrepresented in the third dimension. So that there we see some balancing that needs to occur within some of the gender balance is needed in some of our three dimensions. But we've seen the small progress in the 25% of women are heading missions, but only 8 out of 130 heads of missions have ever been appointed in the last 10 years, and that represents 6%. And I think that's really badly reflects on the OSCE. Heads of institutions are only 17%, and as the Secretary General said, that doesn't show a lot of progress either. But I do think that what I would like to talk about a little bit is that we shouldn't be too worried. We look at the PA ourselves, and I'm proud to suggest that out of the 9 executive members of our 3 committees, 7 of them are women. And that is really a huge progress from the last 2 years. But I think what I want to talk a little bit about is that as we are reviewing in Basel in Switzerland, the OSCE is going to look at Helsinki plus 40. They're going to look at where we go from here. We've heard our president talk today about the 3 areas in which he would like to see some improvements. And what I would like to say is that this is the opportunity for us to look at the structures and the capacity of the OSCE. And that is to look at how we engender this, how we bring about the changes that we require in terms of mainstreaming gender. And to do so, I think it's time for all of us, looking at Beijing plus 20, which occurs next year, we've seen that while we all had strong hopes 20 years ago and at the OSCE 10 years ago in order to look at a balance in gender, we have not been very successful. So I think it's time for us to move beyond the hopes and beyond the aspirational objectives that we set out and talk about some really clear tools that we can use to get some concrete action going. And I think this is where we at the OSCE PA can make some suggestions. And the first one would be to look at how we put together some very clear research and evaluative mechanisms in place. There is an old baseball player in the United States who used to say, his name was Yogi Berra, and he used to say that if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to know when you get there? So we need to set some measurable goals about where we want to go in the next 10 years. We need to be able to evaluate how we're getting to those goals. We need to be able to get some indicators to measure how we do that. And we need to use a very strong tool, and I think that the PA can be very instrumental in helping in this, and that is something called gender-based analysis. And gender-based analysis looks at the reality of the lives of men and the reality of the lives of women. And every time we look at creating legislation or new policies, we look at how that would impact on men's reality of their lives and women's reality of their lives. And if I may have a moment, Mr. President, to give you a couple of examples. One of them is this. If we look at the fact that whenever there is a downturn in the economy, the first thing governments do is they set up an infrastructure program with a lot of construction, it creates jobs, and it's supposed to move the economy forward. Well, only 1% of women in most of the OSCE countries ever work in the construction industry. So when you take that economic growth and you put that policy forward, women do not benefit from it. If we did gender-based analysis beforehand, we would find out that the reason that women do not work in construction jobs is because it requires flexibility of working hours. And in order to get that, because women are responsible for children, they need childcare. And so there are some very simple ways in which we can take clear action in terms of our policy by evaluating. Let us look at men. There are not enough men in nursing professions. Why not? There are not enough men in nursing professions because nursing professions are paid very badly, because it's always been women's work and we've therefore undervalued it. So if we looked at that and we analyzed it and said, how do we value nursing? We might find that if we valued nursing differently and paid it better, more men might get involved in nursing. So let us use some tools that we have. Let us be able at the PA to set a standard of getting those tools, using them, training people on how to use them, and let us see if we can get that going in most of our parliaments. And hopefully, in 10 years' time, when we look back, we will be able to have achieved some very substantial and measurable goals. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much about your excellent floor. And now we go to the next speaker, former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Macedonia sounds much shorter and better. Just a couple of short remarks. I would like to second and support what was said by our American colleagues regarding the human trafficking. Congressman Chris Smith wrote a letter to all of us. It's a great initiative. He has taken this issue to his heart, and we should do our best, what we can do to our governments, not to cut the funding for these issues, because it's one of a number of defining issues of nowadays. And I think that in the recent months and couple of years, really this whole issue gained a momentum, and now it's more and more in the focus. So trafficking of human persons is a deplorable act, and I think we can make a louder stand on that. Also, it's very good that there is an initiative to work with the Marshall Center and to work with the number of NGOs, think tanks, so we can have a deeper understanding for the pressing issue. And just in the final and concluding remarks, I would like to inform you, maybe some of you are familiar, maybe not, but a couple of Southeastern European countries, they are working together to advance the OSCE principles more in our region. So I would like to congratulate the other delegations. In the meantime, we were communicating on a regular basis. So we were in touch with our colleagues from Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Serbia, Slovenia, Montenegro as well. So we're trying to do and to promote the OSCE agenda and principles in Southeastern Europe. Many thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we will close this theme. Thank you. And go to the next one, to the OSCE budget, Mr. Blondal.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Just 2-3 minutes, please, if it's possible, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. I was appointed by the President of PA 2006 to review ongoing work on draft OSCE budget. My mandate includes gathering information and following budgetary development in the OSCE governmental structures, acting as focal point for Assembly recommendation on political and management questions related to the OSCE budget, encouraging discussion within the Parliamentary Assembly on the effective use of OSCE budgetary resources. Recent development and activities. Following my January visit to the German Federal Court of Auditors, Bundesrechnungshof, who currently serves as external auditor for the OSCE, the Vice President of the Court extended an offer to present the findings and key issues arising from the audit work to the members of the OSCE Parliament, PA. The auditors visited the Vienna liaison office in April to discuss their offer with Ambassador Andreas Notel. I am pleased at such a positive outcome, and I am glad that the Vice President of the Court was invited to Geneva. I regret that he was unable to attend today, but I hope he can participate in the upcoming winter meeting in Vienna. In few moments, we will hear OSCE Secretary General Lamberto Cianier present the OSCE budget proposal for the following year, allowing me to raise a couple of points ahead of his presentation. First, regarding the overall level of resources available, I have been advocating for years to strengthen the organization budget, and the modest overall 1.4% increase is welcomed. However, you will examine the proposal in detail. We can continue to see the negative trend of concentrating resources to the Vienna-based administration at the expense of field missions. At the same time, the number of OSCE employees, who I view as the power of the organization, will decrease. My second point concerns the budget proposal to the ODIHR. The proposed growth of ODIHR by 10% is odd, given all the cut back elsewhere in the organization. And I would encourage all actors to bring reasonable expectation to the negotiation table. It is worth recalling that one of the main factors delaying the adoption of 2014 budget until late May was ODIHR request for 30% increase in funding. My future activities, the 2015 Unified Budget proposal will be officially presented to the Permanent Council on 9th October 2014 in Vienna in 5 days. I intend to closely follow the process of its adoption, which must occur before the end of the year, of course, and comment on it if and when appropriate. Thank you.
Peter, thank you very, very much about your valuable contribution. Thank you so much. And now I suppose we go very, very briefly to Christine Mutonen's report about her activities.
Well, thank you very much. Danke, Herr Vorsitzender, geschätzte Kollegen und Kolleginnen. Wir haben ja im Mittelpunkt unserer Debatten, die wir hier in Genf geführt haben, ist die Rolle, also die Sicherheit gestanden und auch die Rolle, die die Parlamente spielen. Und in diesem Zusammenhang möchte ich auf einen Bereich hinweisen, in dem auch die Parlamentarische Versammlung der OSZE sehr aktiv war und auch weiter sein sollte. Es geht um die nukleare Abrüstung und um die Nichtverbreitung dieser Waffen. Und dazu möchte ich ganz kurz einen Hinweis geben. Am 8. und 9. Dezember dieses Jahres findet in Wien eine Konferenz über die humanitären Folgen der Atomwaffen statt. Das ist eine Nachfolgekonferenz von Mexiko und Oslo. Internationale Organisationen der Zivilgesellschaft unterstützen die Konferenz und begleiten sie auch mit Konferenzen und Veranstaltungen rund um die Hauptkonferenz. Das sind ICANN, das ist das Rote Kreuz, das ist aber auch PNND, also Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. Ich weiß, dass sehr viele von unseren Mitgliedern hier auch dort Mitglieder sind. Und das österreichische Parlament wird aktiv mit einer eigenen Veranstaltung sich beteiligen. In den Einladungen zur Konferenz, die an die Regierungen ausgesandt wurden, steht explizit, dass Österreich die Teilnahme von Parlamentarierinnen ermutigt. Also ermutigen Sie bitte Ihre Regierungen, Parlamentarier und Parlamentarierinnen in die Delegationen zu dieser Konferenz aufzunehmen. Und ich würde mich sehr freuen, wenn ich Sie in Wien begrüßen könnte. Danke.
Thank you very much indeed about your kind words. And I think now we can conclude this 5. Yes, we do. And then we move to the number 6. And I welcome Secretary General, Ambassador Lamberto Chenier. Welcome, and I give you the floor. It is very, very vital interest in our side that you are giving your greetings from your side every time we are getting together here in the fall meeting. Thank you about your presence, and the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Secretary General, distinguished members of the Standing Committee of the Parliamentary Assembly. It's a pleasure for me to use this opportunity to brief you on where we stand. The new budget proposal has just been circulated, and we walk through a PowerPoint to illustrate the key elements of this budget proposal. But before starting with the PowerPoint and the presentation, I would like to make an introductory, rather fundamental caveat to the budget and a couple of points around this caveat. The caveat is that you will see in the budget that some of the trends that we have seen in the past, like strengthening the institutions in budgetary terms and the kind of a weakening of the financial support for field operations is continued. In fact, this year, this is not the case. This year, the OSCE invested a huge amount of resources in the field through its operations in Ukraine. The SMM alone has a budget now that stands at the level of 77 million, which is 50% of the unified budget. Of that amount of money, only 13.5 million, which we used out of the cash reserves of the organization, are resources that are attached to a unified budget. Everything else is ex-B funded. So we have voluntary funding supporting this operation, which is, however, not how can I say, a typical extra budgetary activity of the OSCE. To the contrary, it's a core activity of the OSCE. It's based on permanent council decisions. So it is the implementation of key, I would say, decisions in the OSCE in this phase. So I personally find it an anomaly that we do finance core activities of such an importance, such a visibility also for the organization with the tool of extra budgetary funds. And we still need to have a debate on the financing of further 30 million, which will be required in the light of the expansion of the activities of the special monitoring mission in relation to the tasks concerning the ceasefire monitoring and the number of activities, the borders, and the number of activities related to the current situation in eastern Ukraine. So when I say that this trend continues of having stronger central institutions, in fact, this is not the case if we look at the amount of resources that are being invested in core activity of the organization. And actually, in terms of also overall figures, for the first time, while we've seen a decreasing trend of decreasing finances for the OSCE, now if we combine the two elements, we see that the budget now stands at over 200 million altogether. So the Ukraine operation has resulted in a major expansion of the financial resources that the OSCE requires, and the OSCE is acquiring to support its activities on the ground. In relation to the point I was making that we need also to figure out the next 30 million, how to receive them, and there is already a debate, and some think it should continue on an extra budgetary base, and some argue that perhaps it should be reflected in the UB. I have a very strong view myself on that. I think that there's a core activity. This should belong in the unified budget. And in fact, this fetish of having a zero nominal growth should go away when we face such a fundamental challenge to European security and to the role of the organization, for the role of the organization to respond to the situation on the ground. And I think it's not appropriate also for me to have to keep demarching, if not pestering each of your governments to get the money that we need to support this operation. There should be, as there is a support politically for the role that we play in the field, there should be also a responsibility and engagement in supporting in terms of financial resources and also in terms of secondees, experts, seconded experts on the ground, the work of this, the work of the organization in this field. I might add on this that we are still struggling to find, as we are looking now at a very specific profile for the OSCE monitors, that will need a military background to be able to operate effectively in monitoring the ceasefire and in operating in a very complicated environment when breaches of ceasefire are unfortunately still very numerous, and when where we require also the skills to understand who is shooting from where, or to recognize weaponry on the ground and report accurately about it. So we need specific profiles, and we need all your governments to provide us with the support that we require to discharge effectively our functions. So this is the caveat I wanted to present to you, and then I will run through the PowerPoint to explain to you the figures we have, if I manage to have this thing work. What do I need to press? Ah, it's there. Okay. Sorry, I was looking the wrong. Yeah, it's on that screen, not on this. Okay. Yeah. So okay, so we start. Can you? Yes. You see it up there. So the unified budget proposal, first of all, reflects already a discussion we had in the OSCE on the program outline and the recommendations of the chairmanship following that discussion. So this is not coming as a surprise for delegations, but already reflects a debate that we had in late spring, early summer among delegations on the general outlines of the budget. The budget now is putting flesh on the bones, if you want, of this. What we're looking is a total amount of the budget of 144.2 million compared to 142.3 million for last year. The increase of 1.9 million or 1.4% overall reflects a reduction already. So the proposal itself reflects a reduction in real terms over the year before, when we take into account inflationary increase. We estimate this reduction in about 2.5 million and a real decrease of 0.4%. Now, the Secretariat and the institutions propose in different ways. As you heard, ODIHR and the Freedom of the Media are proposing larger increases, the Secretariat a more modest increase of between 1.5 and 2%. But overall, the increase is 3.1 million or 5.1%, which is partly offset by a decrease in field operations of euros 1.1 million or 1.4%. This slide provides the long-term trend in the unified budget and expenditure since 2006. Again, this reflects the unified budget, so this ignores completely reality in a way, because it ignores completely everything we're doing in Ukraine. And of course, if you included that, which we cannot do in the budget in the unified budget in current circumstances, then the lines would really head skywards both for field operations and also in terms of overall resources. But as you see, since 2006, the budget has been reduced by 23.9 million or 14.2%, from 168.2 million in 2006 to 144.2 million proposed for 2015. This resource reduction has largely been driven by, and I'm still looking at this larger period, closure of field operations, including those in Georgia, in Belarus, in Croatia, in particular the reduction of 40.7% in Southeast Europe field operations over this period. It's not only the closure of the mission in Croatia, but also reductions in missions in Bosnia and Kosovo and elsewhere that are very, very large missions, of course. So some of these reductions have resulted, they continue to result in additional taskings for the Secretariat and institution that have to take on tasks, especially on regional initiatives that were performed earlier by operations themselves. Caucasus and Eastern Europe have remained largely stable since 2006, with an increase in Eastern Europe proposed for 2015, primarily due to additional resources requested for the project coordinator in Ukraine. I have to point out in relation to Ukraine also one other element, that while we're investing in the way I described on these operations in Ukraine, the backstopping for these operations by the Secretariat, by the institution, has increased exponentially. Only the amount of travel, the fact that I have almost permanently staff from the Conflict Prevention Center, for instance, in Ukraine, supporting the SMM. The fact that ODIHR has engaged in activities such as human rights assessment studies and the additional work on elections, the presidentials first and the parliamentary next, has implied additional costs that were not foreseen in last year's budget for all central institutions, and we also foresee a continuation of these additional tasks. In Central Asia, resources have increased, so here the trend is contrary to the one for other field operations. In this period, by euro 7 million or 64.9%. So from 12.1 to 20 million proposed for 2015. Let me now briefly present some analysis of the OSCE resources by the type of cost or category. The budget by main cost category shows a decrease in office costs and fixed assets, as well as an increase in staff costs and operational costs. The increase of staff costs of 0.3% or 0.3 million or 0.4% reflects a reduction in staff numbers, which is offset by anticipated salary adjustments. This also reflects the move from annual to biennial steps, so we are cutting on the costs of the organization by reducing a number of factors that increase the cost of staff. For instance, the increases in salary are no longer annual now, we are putting them on a biennial base. And we continue to realign the salary of our locally recruited mission members to 80% of the respective UN salary. And we also have an issue of still a number of countries hosting field operations wanting or not agreeing to exempt local staff from paying local taxes, which is forcing us to reimburse them for these taxes, and it's adding to the cost of personnel because of this lack of exemption from taxes. Now, these initiatives have already produced, as I say, the cuts in the mechanics of the salary package have produced savings. However, they are giving us problems. I already have seen in the last few months a number of recruitment processes resulting unsuccessfully with the offer of a job to an applicant who then looks at the financial conditions of the job and then refusing. The last was last week, a P4 post in the Secretariat After a complex and long recruitment process, we offered the job to the selected candidate, and he looked at the conditions and refused it. And we had a number also of employees who left the organization prematurely, also because they found better salary conditions elsewhere, including in the UN system. Last year, we lost 2 directors. One of them came to Geneva, the other one went to Strasbourg, because they felt, and this was 2 years before the expiry of their contracts, because they felt that the financial conditions were offered by these other organizations were far superior to the ones the OSCE was offering. The slide in front of you demonstrates the participating states' request for administrative efficiency and effectiveness are being heard. It should be stressed not only is the share of staff costs in the OSCE decreasing, it also remains lower than in all other comparable international organizations, including the UN. And this indicates the OSCE continues to be a lean, flexible, and cost-effective organization. In fact, the ratio between administrative staff cost and programmatic cost in the OSCE is the best, the most favorable among the all equivalent international organizations. So we invest more in operations and less in staff and administration. And in fact, I'm also now restructuring the Secretariat, or certain elements of the Secretariat in this current budget, and I'm moving staff from the administrative side to the programmatic side, so cutting down even more the amount of resources we devote to administration. Having said that, and when you talk about trying not to spend too much in administration in the Secretariat, you have to think that the Secretariat is administering in every area, from the recruitment of staff to the procurement, etc., is administering the whole setup of the OSCE, the institutions in different ways, but the institutions, the field operations. So we are supporting the functioning of the whole organization. We, in Vienna, set up the mission that is now on the ground in Ukraine, to give you an example. And so there is a limit to how much you can cut centrally, because then you would curtail the ability of the organization to react as quickly as we proved we could do it to situations requiring a quick response. Now, changes in the resource distribution by main program dimension are provided in this graph. An increase is shown for policy and direction as well as for thematic activities. This is what I was explaining. This is offset by a continuing decrease in the resource share for management and administration during the 3-year period. The reduction in the budget share for management and administration can also be attributed to efficiency measures implemented across the OSCE. This year, we made a point of collecting and reporting on these efficiency measures in the unified budget proposal to clearly demonstrate the good work we are doing to ensure efficient, cost-effective programmatic activities. This is a very detailed report that we present to participating states, but we show how, for instance, now we have a unified system for travel, where we have a self-booking tool, where we try to avoid unnecessary or complicated administrative processes, and we really streamline everything as much as we can. This slide presents an analysis of the trend in the distribution of posts by institutions and regions from 2010-2014. Similar to financial resources, there is a tendency for reduction also in posts in Southeast Europe, increases in Eastern Europe, the Caucasus and Central Asia, an increase in the Secretariat and institutions from 18.9% to 22% proposed for 2004. While there has been staff reduction in Southeast Europe, the increase in the ratio of staff in other regions reflects the changing relative size that result, as well as participating states' decisions to increase mandates and activities in certain areas. Let me also say, and back to 2 words on the Secretariat, that the modest increase we are proposing, which is an increase for the Secretariat that is below zero real growth, it's just above zero nominal growth, reflects also some of the programmatic priorities of participating states. For instance, I'm asking for the strengthening of the office of the Special Coordinator on Trafficking for Human Beings, and I heard this now being discussed just prior to my presentation. So we have an Office of a Special Representative. We have been coordinating with ODIHR that had to make savings, but we feel that we need to compensate for that reduction, and so we need additional resources to make sure that overall the role of the organization in addressing the important issue of trafficking human beings remains not affected, if you want, by these cuts. And so we are trying also to invest in those areas that we perceive as being key priority areas for participating states and therefore for the organization as such. Now, on this slide, and there's only one after this, let me point that the challenges of management of human resources for the OSCE include our ability to attract, as I was mentioning earlier, to attract and retain highly qualified staff, whether international or local, to ensure that we have a workforce that represents a healthy geographic diversity, gender balance, and the generational balance. On gender balance, I also heard the points that were made earlier by your rapporteur. In the Secretariat, to give you just a few figures, we are close to a 50% ratio between the genders. Recruitments in last year, we recruited 64% women. So there is really an effort to ensure gender balance in the presence of the staff in the Secretariat. And of course, we have a gender action plan, and we are focusing very much on gender mainstreaming. We're examining all the programs that we run in our operations. We also have a gender expert in the monitoring mission in Ukraine. So we are looking how we can mainstream gender in everything we do, in all our projects in the ground. We are now discussing gender budgeting also as a future way to try to continue promoting this. While it is in a way easier to work in the organization on gender issues, and this also applies to a number of other questions, it is more, and we find it more difficult to engage with participating states to have a debate about individual gender action plans for each of them. So that's, in my view, one of the areas where we will have to focus more in the future, and to compare notes, and to have countries compare notes, and to have a process of peer review also on gender issues. Back to the report here, it's important to note the OSCE continues to rely very heavily on international seconded staff. 18.3% of the total staff is almost twice than the share of international contracted staff. So we rely massively on seconded staff. But the problem we face is that the number of secondments are decreasing constantly. So it is difficult to find good seconded staff. Cuts, obviously, in budgets of individual participating states have an impact on their ability to second good staff for the organization. The organization is suffering because of that. The number of countries being able to pay international secondees continues to decrease. While it is much appreciated that 44 participating states made a total of 1,792 nominations in 2013, that is less than 2012, when 48 participating states nominated their nationals. The number of nominations per vacancy dropped to an average of 8.5, not providing us with a choice we would require for the specialized work we do. In 2013, more than 1 in 3 seconded vacancies had to be extended or re-advertised due to a lack of suitably qualified candidates. And this obviously is also complicating our life and requiring much more work for our recruitment processes, because we have to re-advertise and restart all the time. On the basis of these figures and trends, in 2013, the Secretariat submitted a number of proposals to participating states on improving the system, but we are getting a bit of a pushback. So we would like also to get more support. We would like to assist participating states, to offer the possibility to contact secondees ourselves and propose them to participating states for them to second them to the organization. But some want to have, how can I say, a strict internal control on their secondment process. I mentioned the SMM issues, so I'll come to the concluding slide with a few final key points. Compared to 2014, the 2015 unified budget proposal represents a modest increase to implement the tasks assigned by participating states as set out in the budget. The proposal has been developed as a consensus document, reflecting, as I mentioned at the outset, the discussion we had. We have implemented efficiencies and cost-saving measures to reduce the impact of inflation, and further measures are proposed for 2015. And I'm urging participating states to enable the organization to maintain the capability and effectiveness to allocate resources to support the strategy. There is a discussion, and you should also be aware of that, on the reform of the budget cycle in the context of Helsinki Plus 40. A proposal being made in these discussions is to introduce a multi-year and multi-stage planning and budget cycle that ensures earlier, greater and more structured involvement of participating states. I personally welcome this initiative and stand ready to support the consultations and the negotiations. I wish every success to the Swiss chairmanship and the Serbian ACMF chair in their efforts to strike a balance between the position of 57, and I really hope that this year we'll manage to get the decision on the budget on time. You will know that for the current year the decision was reached only in late spring, and that was a serious problem, because also where we wanted to achieve savings and we wanted to cut, to move resources, etc., we couldn't do it because the budget was not approved and the post table was not approved. So we had to keep posts that we could have phased out because certain activities were terminated. We had to keep those posts for 6 months until the budget was approved, and that was an additional cost for the organization. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much indeed, and I want to thank you for your exhaustive and careful and all-out report. Very much indeed. Thank you. And I suppose you're ready to answer to the few questions and comments. And the first one goes to Serbia, Diana Jugomanovic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank to our Secretary General, Mr. Zanier, for this comprehensive presentation, as well as to our Treasurer, Mr. Batelli. Finance means politics. I would like to emphasize, as Mr. Zanier already said, that Serbia, from the 1st of October, take over the chairmanship on the Advisory Committee on Management and Finance. I'm really glad that many of us today speaking about budget, speaking about finance, and why it is important for us. It is important that from the recent past, OSCE today is one of the most relevant multilateral international organizations today. And that is why we should use this, if I may say so, face-to-face forum to discuss these sensitive issues of financing. I would like to say that my conclusion for this comprehensive presentation that was made by Mr. Zanieri is that conflict time costs us no more than peacetime. That this policy of zero nominal growth policy is not sustainable on a long run. I would also like to make the comment to the paper that was distributed by American delegation that shows us what are the concrete consequences of cutting of budget. So it was written here that cutting of budget has the consequence that the budget to combat trafficking in persons were cut almost in half. So that is the final consequence if we do not make some kind of contingency scenario how to increase our capacity to make concrete policy on the field and to combat the most urgent problems in nowadays world. So as Serbia, who will be at the chairman position of the Advisory Committee on Management and Finance, our task is to facilitate that dialogue. So I would dare to ask you to make a comment. Is it possible for all of us to not to end up with the last-minute deal on financing, but to make concrete deadline, if I may say so, maybe it is strong expression, whether we are possible to make the final decision, final consensus on the 2050 budget by the end of December, probably around December 20, the time of Christmas, when institutions are still working, so it makes all of us to make our plans. So not to end up with these last-minute deals. We are politicians here, so we are trained to think in the terms of costs and benefits. But maybe our Secretary General, Mr. Zanier, could make some comments comparing to other multilateral international organizations. How expensive, or sorry for the expression, how cheap OSCE is comparing to other multilateral organizations, so that way we will have that comprehensive insight what we can do in the future. And I would like, and I will end up with this, like to emphasize what is already emphasized before, that Turkey and Germany, as well as Denmark and Austria, have made that voluntary extra budgetary contributions, and I think that these positive examples should be always praised by all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, and if it's all right for the Secretary General, I would be happy if we will take 3 questions in a row, and then you will collect the answers, and we go further now by the question by Mr. Patelli, our Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Secretary General, for your presentation. Well, my question is related to the need of reopening the field missions in Georgia and Belarus. And also Mongolia asked the OSCE to open a field presence in Ulaanbaatar. These issues are discussed in Vienna, and how is these problems are treated, if they are at all? Thank you.
Thank you, and then to Iceland, Petur, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, President. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, very much for your presentation. I have 3 questions. I am happy to hear about the funds going to the operation in Ukraine in hope to get peace. And that brings me to the question, do we need some crisis funding by OSCE to meet unexpected crises, natural or human origin? Then the second question, we have often adopted resolutions that call on the PA to approve the budget and annual accounts of OSCE for sake of transparency and accountability. In our parliaments, we control the taxpayers' money and we understand better the operations paid. What is your view of enhancing parliamentary oversight in the OSCE? And then the third question. The ODIHR is asking for 10% budget increase in most of extra 1.6 million euros going for its election department. ODIHR's expenses have never been transparent, and we have never seen a report coming from its field audits. In a context of economic constraints, do you think this is a reasonable request?
Quite many questions. And now we will hear the answers, please.
With pleasure. And first of all, the point from Serbia, to whom I wish best of luck for the chair of the ACMF, very important but a tough job. The problem with respecting deadlines is that we have to be realistic. The OSCE, however we define it, is a very political organization. And it's an organization which is now also feeling the heat of the conflict, of a more complex system of relations among its membership. Decision-making is becoming more difficult, it's not becoming any easier. Also, as we are heading towards a ministerial, there is quite a lively debate, and we don't see at this point very clearly what we are heading towards. The Swiss are doing an excellent job in preparing a set of decisions, but will it be possible in the current political environment to achieve those decisions? The budget is no exception. So we may find a very strong polarization within the organization where there is a debate, and the debate is also in the context of Helsinki Plus 40 on role of institutions, on how much money to allocate to certain areas vis-à-vis others, or certain thematic areas, and as well as certain geographical areas. So I don't expect this to be an easy debate, so I obviously will keep asking, and I would invite you to support me and the institutions in pushing governments to come quickly to an agreement, but this again might become difficult. And we have seen that as crisis started, this crisis affected the political process and politicized the process of debate on the budget. Now, the other direction which we could move is to develop a mechanism that does recognize the fact that the budget discussion and budget decision might be difficult, but yet gives us a stronger basis to move ahead. Like a default decision, if there is no budget by the 31st of December, then the Secretary General and the heads of institutions are authorized to spend at the level of the previous year's budget. So that we have a provisional budget, but not a month-by-month budgeting as we have in the current circumstances. But we have a stronger basis, and then when the budget is adopted, we will adjust to that. But some mechanism, I think, would be needed. If we find a better way, and if we find the willingness to conclude, of course, that would be much better. How cheap the OSCE is, that's a very relevant question, and I apologize if some of you have already heard this comment from me, which I made a number of times in the past. My previous job, before being in the current one, I was, and you may be familiar with that, I was in Kosovo as head of UNMIC, the UN peacekeeping operation there. When I started as a special representative of the Secretary General there, one of those things I looked at the budget, I had a budget of 225 million. So a kind of mid-size UN peacekeeping operation has alone a budget that is bigger than the budget of an institution that has secretariat, including the conference services, 3 institutions, 18 field operations. So in a way, in absolute terms, the budget of the OSCE is a very modest budget. And to expect that with this very modest budget, we can effectively operate as we are trying to do in a difficult situation like the one in Ukraine, I think the international community should invest much more in an organization like ours that has the possibility to make a difference. And sometimes we don't see enough attention. We see political attention, but when it comes to investing in the organization, the political attention is not matched by the willingness to put more resources in what we are doing. On Georgia, Belarus, Mongolia, Mr. Battelli, of course we deal with these issues all the time. And with Georgia, I've been discussing this with the Russians, with Minister Lavrov. I've been discussing it with the Georgians. We've tried various models. And of course, these are all very political issues. The problem is not a lack of willingness to reopen an operation. On Mongolia, we are ready. The Mongolians are ready. But the chairmanship is consulting, and there is no consensus. We need a mandate. The mandate needs to be approved by consensus. There is no consensus. There are countries that are objecting. And this is has stalled the process. On Belarus, we are now discussing with the Belarusian government a package of projects. So we are restarting a practical cooperation. Whether this practical cooperation may result in some kind of a presence on the ground, it's not in the cards now. This is not foreseen. But maybe if this cooperation develops, we might create the conditions to have a more concrete interaction. So every situation is different. Work is ongoing on all of these and other. and other situations, but it's not lack of willingness, it's really the political obstacles that we find on the way. On Iceland, Ukraine, I think I answered the point. It's crisis finding. We have really to, and you can play an important role with your governments to make sure the contribution of the organization is well recognized. We need the resources. And as I said at the very beginning, I think it would be good to have the resources in the budget and to have formally a recognition of the need to upgrade the funding of the organization for it to operate efficiently in this situation. The parliamentary oversight, it's really an issue on which I don't feel I have to have a standing, because you're parliamentarians and you have the intergovernmental side. So it is between the intergovernmental side and the parliamentary side that the issue should be discussed. So it is between you and them. I'm simply here to promote transparency, and there is awareness in the intergovernmental side that this transparency is there, that I'm attending and I'm discussing these issues with you. But for the rest is between you and your governments, and between you as a group and the participating states as a group, that this discussion could develop, perhaps in the context of Helsinki Plus 40 reforms, etc. So there is a need for a brainstorming, and perhaps there will be decisions. So I only welcome stronger interaction. That's all I can say from my side. And on the electoral department of ODIHR, I confess I'm chief administrative officer for the organization, but when it comes to the budget, I don't really negotiate with ODIHR their own budget. They present it to me, and I recognize what they consider to be their needs, and I don't really assess whether their needs are how can I say, adequate, or whether they are somehow asking for too much or not enough. I'm trying to ask everybody to be reasonable in their proposals, because we know resources are overall limited, and we have to make sure that they are as much as possible distributed in a how can I say, in a just way across the organization, so that everybody can and everybody's needs are satisfied. But I have no reason to pass any judgment on the request of ODIHR on the elections. It's really their call.
Thank you. Thank you about your excellent answers. And then we go further. The next one goes to the United Kingdom. Lord Bonas, it's your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. President, and thank you to the Secretary General for his presentation. I really have a question and a request. If we are going to, and I quote the Secretary General, be the interface between the governmental side and Parliament, and have that role, if we are going to have the discussions, if we are going to assist in pushing the governments, then my request is, may we please have this presentation, even if it is after the presentation rather than before. I have to say, it's probably my eyesight, but it's jolly difficult to actually get the details and make a note of it. To feel that I'm properly briefed to go back to discuss with ministers on the basis of no piece of paper is actually, it may be fine for everybody else, but I personally find it extremely difficult. I think if we are going to have this interaction, we ought to have the details circulated before this meeting. I made this request this time last year, so that we can look at it, take advice before we have the meeting in terms of the questions, and more importantly, help fight the organization's battles with our governments. So we really need these details, if not before, after.
And
Can I just react to this?
Okay.
I apologize. I was convinced that the report was circulated, was available. I will make sure, I will discuss with the Secretariat. I didn't know it wasn't. But of course there is no reason why it shouldn't. So I'll make sure that it is circulated.
Thank you. And then Mrs. Mahima Landry from Belgium.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would address to Secretary General about one issue, also the issue that was spoken about of our colleagues of the United States. My question is if the budget for human trafficking for next year will be again at the same level as in 2013. I think we think also from Belgium we support this demand because human trafficking is still very necessary in almost every country. It's the combating of against human trafficking. It's about fighting for human rights. So can you explain us, because it's not only an issue that we didn't see the details, we didn't have the details. We don't see the details. What is the budget that you provide for next year for human trafficking? So I would also ask you, how will you avoid next year the same discussion like last year, when it took more than 6 months before there was the governments agreed about the budget for human trafficking. So I hope it will not be the same problem next year, and which measures will be taken to avoid this. And so finally, we join the urgent ask of the United States to see that there is enough budget for next year, so the fight against human trafficking can be assured. Thank you.
Thank you. And then 2 more questions, and then the answers. First, Mr. Koskinen, and then Mr. Aibi.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's very obvious that this OSCE budgetary reform is needed more than ever, but we have seen for over a decade that it is very difficult to reach a just share of contributions from member states according to the GDPs nowadays and otherwise changed circumstances. So we need creative solutions because it's so difficult to make right decisions. One of these creative solutions has been this measure of seconded experts. In a way, it's a measure of voluntary fee or voluntary contribution from member states to the organization. So could we use this method also for getting more stable resources for the organization, both on the governmental and parliamentary side, so that we could kind of rewrite the key of sharing the contributions in a modern way, that the basis is nowadays contributions, but on that, more than that, we could write a list of contributions which would be voluntary according to the GDPs and populations nowadays. So it kind of a scheme for voluntary contributions, and those countries who are willing and see the importance of our organization would make these contributions from year to year. Thank you.
And Andreas Aibi, please.
Ja, Herr Vorsitzender, geschätzte Damen und Herren, wir sprechen da von kreativen Beiträgen, wir sprechen von freien Beiträgen, von Details, die bekannt sein müssen. Für mich ist sowohl als auch das Entscheidende. Ich glaube, die Details waren allen bekannt. Unsere Parlamente wissen, wie es aussieht mit dem OSZE-Budget. Und wenn ich an mein Land erinnere, war es doch ziemlich problemlos. Und ich möchte das hier auch gesagt haben, 2 Tagungen im gleichen Jahr durchzuführen. Das heißt, unsere Tagung hier in Genf und vor allem die Ministertagung in Basel, die gewaltige Summen verschlingt. Und das Parlament hat am Schluss Ja gesagt. Und zu all jenen, die das Präsidium übernehmen, möchte ich sagen, auch hier ist es einfach so, dass das Ganze nicht berechenbar ist. Wenn ich zum Beispiel die Situation in diesem Jahr anschaue mit dem Konflikt der Ukraine und Russlands, da haben wir eine Taskforce formiert, die immer mehr und mehr Leute absorbierte. Und auch diese Kosten haben wir übernommen, im Wissen, dass die OSCE eben eine wichtige Aufgabe zu erfüllen hat. Und das hat unser Parlament auch begriffen. Also wir Parlamentarierinnen und Parlamentarier sind ständig aufgefordert, die Werte dieser OSZE weiterzugeben. Und so kann es dann auch um größere Beträge gehen, wie es bei uns der Fall ist, die da am Schluss auch gesprochen werden.
Secretary General, if you mind, just in maximum 1 minute to our common friend Alain Nery from France.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, merci. Je crois qu'on est en train d'aborder un sujet capital pour l'avenir du fonctionnement de notre organisation. Je l'ai dit tout à l'heure dans ma première intervention, ça fait un certain nombre d'années que nous intervenons, un certain nombre, pour dire qu'il faut remettre à jour et à niveau les finances de l'OSCE, en revoyant les contributions des différents pays. On ne peut pas, quand on est une organisation aussi sérieuse que l'OSCE, dire qu'on fait un budget en s'appuyant sur des contributions aléatoires au bon vouloir des uns et des autres. Il faut qu'on sache de quelles sommes on peut disposer. Je n'ai jamais vu faire un budget qu'il soit dans nos communes, dans nos départements, dans nos régions, en disant je vais faire le budget, je vais l'équilibrer avec les dons que je vais recevoir. Ça, c'est pas sérieux. Quand on fait un budget, si on a des dons, ça viendra en plus. Mais il faut équilibrer le budget avec ce qu'on est sûr de recevoir. Et en fonction de quoi, il faut que les règles soient claires, nettes et précises. Aujourd'hui, on s'aperçoit qu'on a besoin de ressources supplémentaires pour faire face à un travail sérieux, efficace, encore plus qu'il ne l'est alors qu'il est de très grande qualité. On voit bien que les détachements, on en aura de moins en moins parce que chaque pays a à faire face à ses propres dépenses. Donc je pense qu'aujourd'hui, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, il se dégage un consensus dans cette Assemblée pour dire que nous souhaitons une révision des contributions en tenant compte du PNB de chaque pays et de sa démographie. Donc, je pense que vous pouvez être effectivement notre interprète pour dire que lors du prochain budget pourrait déjà être pris en compte une modification du barème des cotisations, qu'il me semble, mais si j'ai bien compris les conclusions de notre première partie de discussion, qu'un projet pourrait être présenté de révision des contributions lors de la réunion de Bâle, lors de la prochaine réunion de bureau. Parce que repousser, il faut savoir qu'on arrive en fin d'année et qu'on va voter nos budgets nationaux. Donc je crois que si on veut changer les règles de contribution des budgets nationaux, il faut qu'on ait les résultats avant. Il ne faut pas repousser constamment une décision parce qu'elle est indispensable de prendre immédiatement.
Merci beaucoup. And then, Secretary General, please.
Thank you. On the budget of the Office on Combating Trafficking in Human Beings, what we have seen is that ODIHR had to face. We had a kind of how can I say, a bit of a duplication in the organization in this area, even though it was a healthy one and the interaction was good because we had an office in ODIHR and we have a special representative who is double-hatted also as a coordinator in the Secretariat with an office on combating trafficking in human beings. Now ODIHR had to prioritize, and by prioritizing they had to phase out their unit and moving the responsibilities all to this unit in the Secretariat. Now, as a result of that, I had to request a strengthening of the unit in the Secretariat, asking an additional official in coordination with ODIHR so that we can compensate, we can organize also a session in the HDIM dealing with trafficking in human beings, again in close coordination with ODIHR. Of course, this is not reflecting the policy that certain participating states follow of zero national growth, zero nominal growth in the budget. So I need them to understand that due to these restructurings, we need to add resources. Zero nominal growth will kill this and will affect the effectiveness of the action of the organization in dealing with trafficking human beings. So I really need all the support I can get to have this new position established and not possibly at the cost of something else somewhere else. And so to have a net increase so that the organization can continue dealing effectively with this, very serious issue. The issue of secondments. It is important also to understand that the secondment is not really alone a solution to a problem. Yes, it is in many ways an in-kind contribution to the organization. But if you take SMM, the mission in Ukraine, which is largely based on secondments, for every secondee, we have to pay a per diem, which is between 100 to 200 euros a day. And most, not most, but many secondees do live out of that. They don't get a salary from home. They're simply paid by us. So there is a cost per secondee. And then, of course, for secondee, we need to give him a desk, a car, a computer, a telephone, in some cases a satellite telephone. So there is an investment around the person for the person to be able to operate effectively. So yes, secondment looks like a cheap way of performing the tasks, but at the end of the day is not as cheap, even though in some cases countries invest a lot in their secondees, and there is, I accept the cost for that. On the issue of the creative Beiträge, yes, I agree. I take note of the point. It's a point I made myself, and I really wish and hope that countries will be forthcoming in recognizing the role of the organization in a crisis situation and accepting it's a good investment that can save potentially larger crises down the line and larger costs down the line if we don't invest in stopping the crisis at this point. The problem of the scales of contribution, les clés de répartition, it is, I fully agree avec Monsieur Néry, I fully agree that we need to look at this issue of clés de répartition. And it's the way it is now, it reflects an old reality that needs to be updated. However, this debate has gone on already for over a year, and we've called in experts, including from the United Nations, and work is ongoing, but it's not proceeding well enough. I don't think, frankly, from what I'm seeing, I don't think there is a likelihood that by the Basel Ministerial will come to an agreement on that. So I would encourage everybody to engage seriously in this, but views are very different. And of course, financial situations being what they are, there are some that are not, how can I say, very enthusiastic in this debate. So there are some that are pushing and some that are resisting. So if we manage to do it, I would fully support, because then this will create a better atmosphere. But unfortunately, the problem is still there, it's not solved. I only hope that this will not become a precondition for not investing in the organization. So I hope we can maintain the two things distinct, because we need also the continuing financial support of countries for what we do. Thank you.
Very good, and our deepest thanks to you. Very extraordinary good report and comprehensive answers as well. Thank you very much indeed. And now we have very limited time to do our next duty, and it is to give the floor to our next fall meeting host to Mongolia, and Mr. Nyama Engpold will have the floor very briefly.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, colleagues, this is the second time that we are attending both our CEP autumn meeting and the Standing Committee meeting. And I would like to thank all participating countries for their kind support rendered to Mongolia, and reaffirm that it's our pleasure and great honor to be a part of this biggest security cooperation organization in the world. As you already know, we have expressed our proposal to host the 2015 PAM autumn meeting in Ulaanbaatar city. We appreciate the positive feedback from the President and the Secretary General. During our meeting in December 2013, Mr. Kirill Kapic, the then President of the Assembly, expressed his opinion that 2016 annual meeting or autumn meeting of the 2015 could be convened in Mongolia. And if this esteemed committee makes a decision to hold that meeting in Ulaanbaatar, organizational activities to set the exact date, the agenda, the theme, and the format of the meeting and the logistics of the meeting should start as soon as possible. Taking into consideration the geographical and geopolitical situation of our country, and as the newest and easternmost in terms of the geography member of the organization, we need your understanding, assistance, and support in order to make this event a great experience of for Mongolian Parliament. I believe that the organizing OSCE autumn meeting in our country will be a successful step up into the organization to advance security sector cooperation among participating states and to contribute to the activities of the Parliamentary Assembly. And I think that a team from OSCE PA International Secretariat will visit Ulaanbaatar sometime this autumn to evaluate the possible venue and hotels for the meeting and also discuss all practical logistical aspects with our parliament. And I think some of our colleagues who still wonder whether it's worth gathering in Mongolia will get some answers to their questions. And I guess after that, this esteemed committee will make the final decision. And while conveying the best regards from Mr. Engbold, the chairman of the Mongolian Parliament, to all participants here, it is my honor to reconfirm our and his invitation to host the next autumn meeting in Mongolia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And I want to agree with you by saying that we have heard very many speeches today how to contribute our financial situation in the OSCE PA, and I should say that the best possible contribution would be to host our annual session or our meetings wherever they will take place. But thank you once more. And now, very briefly, our Secretary General about the upcoming meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've announced earlier the meetings that have been decided, and the representative of Mongolia has indicated their willingness to host our fall meeting next year. As most of you know, for the past 2 years, I have been asking for volunteers to host our annual sessions in 2016, 2017, and 2018. Normally, these annual sessions are scheduled 3 years in advance because of the need to reserve several hundred hotel rooms as well as all the other logistical requirements. There are many states that have not yet hosted an annual session, and there are a number of people who seem to be willing to host fall meetings because they're less expensive and less difficult. But we have been scouring the horizon for someone to host 2016, and I think, Mr. President, one delegation has come forward, and perhaps they would like to have the floor. Georgia.
Our Georgian delegation is just in front of me, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my pleasure, really, to invite OSCE 2016 annual session in Georgia. We propose a nice seashore city of Batumi, and we highly appreciate if committee meeting will endorse that. So, and we can actually very smoothly start the preparation of the meeting in 2016 annual session in Georgia. Thank you very much.
So, and we have also on our list of invitation for Assembly's meeting in the future. So it means that anybody wants to take the floor in this context? It's up to you. So how many hands do I see? Doris from Germany, please, Doris.
Herr Präsident, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen! In Deutschland ist das nicht ganz so einfach, eine Zusage zu geben. Das muss bei uns durch verschiedene Stationen. Selbst wenn der Bundestagspräsident sofort begeistert ist, wovon ich ausgehe, heißt das noch lange nicht, dass das eine Zusage ist. Das muss erst durch den Ältestenrat, dann die Mittel müssen bewilligt werden, wobei selbst die Mittel ist kein wirkliches Problem. Aber das dauert. Ich kann deswegen heute nur sagen, dass ich versuche, dass Berlin eine der nächsten Jahrestagungen ausrichtet. Ich kann Ihnen aber heute nicht zusagen, ob es die 2016er Tagung, dann müsste ich mich mit dem Kollegen absprechen, ob wir vielleicht tauschen, oder vielleicht auch erst die 2018er Tagung sein könnte. 2017 haben wir im September Neuwahlen des Bundestages. Das wäre dann auch ziemlich ungünstig, wäre auch ziemlich Unruhe mit den zumindest den deutschen Delegierten. Deswegen kann ich Ihnen heute nur zusagen, dass ich alles tun werde, um Ihnen in den nächsten 2 Wochen mitzuteilen, wie in Deutschland die Entscheidung hier weiterläuft. Ich würde mich natürlich sehr freuen und es wäre eine große Ehre, wenn wir die Jahrestagung der OSZE-PV einmal wieder in Deutschland haben könnten.
Thank you, Doris. Every one of us, we are very, very happy to come to Berlin whenever the invitation will be in front of us. Thank you so much. So, IAB also, Andreas, you have the floor.
Ja, Herr Vorsitzender, geschätzte Damen und Herren, es geht nicht um eine weitere Tagung, die wir organisieren möchten, aber wir haben einen Vorschlag, das heißt die italienische und die Schweizer Delegation für die Frühjahrstagung in Wien, dass wir die Gefallenen zugunsten unserer Werte der OSZE, ich denke an Laurent Etienne, ein Schweizer, der am 2. Oktober gefallen ist, und den italienischen Fotografen Andrea Ronchelli, der am 25. Mai gestorben ist in der Ukraine, in Slowiansk, dass man diese in einer Form ehren würde oder etwas zugunsten ihrer Familien, dass man das im Frühling in Wien machen könnte und das im Namen der OSZE und durch den Präsidenten Kanerva. Denn es geht doch tiefer und es sind die Werte unserer Organisation. Ich denke an Solidarität, an Information und alles, was dabei ist. Und wir möchten das so beantragen.
Thank you very much about your nice idea. Thank you so much. And then we have also 2 other names on the list. First, Mr. Suarez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to say, just as your special representative for the South Caucasus, that I see with great enthusiasm the offer that was made by our colleagues of Georgia, and I think we should accept it. I recognize that Germany is Germany, but if we had the meeting in Georgia, it would be good for Georgia, for the problems in Georgia, and for all the South Caucasus conflicts that we are dealing with.
Antidel, Italy.
Sì, grazie Presidente. Io prendo brevemente la parola per sottolineare l'importanza della proposta avanzata congiuntamente dalla delegazione svizzera italiana di prevedere all'interno di una prossima assemblea un momento per ricordare Etienne e Laurent Etienne e Andrea Rocchelli. Noi eravamo in Ucraina proprio per il monitoraggio delle elezioni quando purtroppo il nostro Andrea Rocchelli, un giovane reporter, è morto e abbiamo purtroppo dovuto accogliere i genitori venuti a Kiev per recuperare la salma. Io credo che sia giusto che comunque la nostra assemblea preveda questo momento di ricordo, perché è proprio grazie a persone come Lorraine o come Andrea che comunque l'opinione pubblica può aprire gli occhi di fronte alle tante tragedie del mondo. Io credo che loro abbiano pagato un prezzo altissimo, ma che può essere considerato un tributo all'affermazione dei principi di giustizia e di quei diritti che purtroppo inevitabilmente in ogni guerra vengono calpestati. Grazie.
Thank you, and shortly, Armenia.
Я всецело поддерживаю предложение Швейцарии и Италии, но там погибли и российские тележурналисты, и журналисты, и фотографы. Давайте между погибшими, которые исполняли свой профессиональный долг, не проводить разницы. То есть мы должны воздать должное всем без исключения репортерам, которые выполняли свой профессиональный долг. Спасибо.
Thank you very much indeed. Now we have to make official decision about the annual session 2016, who will host that meeting, and I have just one concrete suggestion in front of me, and it's Georgia. And unanimously, I think that we will decide to go to Georgia 2016. Thank you. And before closing this session, I want to thank very much our entrepreneurs. Also the extra work in here. We have been too long time in here, but we are very grateful for your excellent work, and we very highly appreciate that one. So thank you very much indeed.
See you tomorrow morning.
And thank you all of us, all of you, and we will continue tomorrow morning in here, and you're most welcome tomorrow morning session. Thank you.
We have a 10-minute meeting with the Mongolians right here in about a couple of minutes once they just cool down.